introduction, the Reverend Dan Bryant, First Christian Church in Square One Villages will start, and he'll be followed by Reverend Melanie Oommen of First Congregational United Church of Christ, talking about family housing on church property, as will Reverend Brent Was of the Episcopal Church of the Resurrection, who has been exploring parking lot tiny houses. So 41 minutes from now, David Hazen, the CEO of the Emerald Compassionate Network, will facilitate the small group work and then reconvening as a whole to share our ideas. And I would like to thank you again for being here and introduce you to Dan Bryant.
So I do wear two hats, and one of them is for Square One Villages, and so I'm going to be talking mostly about that, but I'm also going to be talking about a little bit about the work that this congregation is doing and has done on this topic, and it just delights me to be able to speak about this. My part of the program is 20 minutes. Should be able to do that, we'll see, but this is typically a 30-minute presentation or so, cut out a few things, so hopefully we can get through this. So why is a pastor of a downtown church working on homelessness? And most of you know that this has been a very significant issue in our community for many years, and it's precisely because I serve this church, I've served it since 1991, that this has become a very prominent issue for me, and just that there are just so many folks that just keep coming to us because we are in the heart of Eugene and asking for help, and that I have felt a strong desire to go from pulling people out of the river to going upriver to find out why people are falling in, and to spend more and more effort to try to do that kind of preventing work to keep people from falling into that river. And if you haven't seen our beautiful mural just added to the side of the building here this summer from the Eugene Mural Project, Dr. King, for me this really signifies the work that we do. And King talked a lot about the beloved community and creating that space where every person is welcome, regardless of the color of their skin, and we can add to that all other kinds of conditions, situations, that every person is a child of God and deserves a place to be. And that has been very central to the work that we are doing here, to treat every person as a neighbor, to find ways that we can help individuals who are left on the street to live with some dignity. And I like to tell the groups that I speak to that because I'm a preacher, I need a text to preach from. So the text, typically I'm speaking in more secular settings on this, so the text I use is from the Gospel of Us. There is no place like home, there is no place like home, there is no place like home. Oddly enough, nobody clicks their heels when I do that, and everyone's still here, not Kansas, but but you get the sense of that. What would it be like to not have that home? To think about how important home is to every one of us. This happens to be my daughter with her grandparents in the family home, and so I have a lot of emotion when I see this picture, and I think most of us do associate with our home those kinds of emotions. And what's it like then when you have no home, no place to keep your belongings, no place to get well when you're sick, no place to brush your teeth, and so on and so forth. And our courts have begun to recognize now that we cannot punish people simply because they do not have a home, particularly if there is no other shelter. So many of you, I think, probably know of the Boise decision just recently reached that says that you cannot cite someone, you cannot criminalize homelessness, basically. You can't put someone in jail because they have no place to be and they're sleeping on your sidewalk. That is cruel and unusual punishment. And there are some that are beginning to push that issue here in the city. The city does not put people in jail for camping, but they do give them tickets, $200 tickets. And we have attorneys who think that that would also fall under this decision. The city disagrees, but there may be a court case before too long that might help us settle that matter, but we'll see. But for me, simply put, homelessness is a justice issue, and I would suggest it's the greatest injustice that we face as a society since Dr. King and friends walked across that Selma Bridge now just over 50 years ago, because there is a basic injustice built into the system when you do not have that which so many of us take for granted. It's absolutely fundamental to those rights that Thomas Jefferson penned into the Declaration of Independence, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And there's often a stigma and a shame that comes from being homeless. But from my perspective, the real shame is that we have made it nearly impossible for the poorest of the poor to live with any dignity among us when there is no place for them to be. So we, in the last 27 years that I've served in this church, have embarked on a number of ministries that seek to address this. And I use this picture in particular because a number of people will recognize some of the individuals in it, but particularly the woman on the right, Carrie Miller, who was found outside of Whitebird, 2 years ago I think it was, on a cold winter night. And we knew Carrie quite well in this church. She was here frequently, and when she was drunk, she was a mean drunk that created problems for us. When she was sober, she was absolutely wonderful. But she had a reputation of people referred to her on the street as Mama Carrie, because she took care of other people on the street. And when she was sheltered in the Whoville camp there on Franklin Boulevard for the 3 months that was operating, she was not a nuisance. And the Eugene police reported to us, they didn't have to arrest Carrie because she had a place to be. And she could function as a member of a society. The memorial service that was held for her at Central Presbyterian Church was one of the most emotional, powerful, spiritual services I've ever attended. It's just incredibly powerful. And so to remember the humanity of every individual on the street and to find ways to assist them. And I want to be clear, and I've said this so many times, the problem is not the homeless. We have to change our way of thinking. The problem is not the homeless. The problem is lack of shelter. The problem is lack of adequate services. The problem is a system that does not address the needs of people living on the street. So to focus on that as the problem, not on the homeless as the problem, is essential. So one of the things many of you know Square One Villages has done is created a tiny house community called Opportunity Village. We've now been operating for 5 years. We had to change the name of our nonprofit from Opportunity Village Eugene to Square One Villages when we started working on a second project. But we like to think of ourselves as a place that's helping people to start over at Square One. And we built that village with a lot of volunteer labor. I just checked this just the other day, because I've been saying this for some time now, and I never went back to look at the bank records, and discovered I was right, that we had just a little over $10,000 when we started. Every weekend when we would have a build, more donations would come in. And so this was a very grassroots effort. Cost us a little over $200,000 when all said and done. But half of that was in materials, so in cash was actually less than $100,000. But just involving a lot of volunteers and the residents of the village themselves, who were very active in that building process. And it's become a very nice little community. How many people have been to Opportunity Village? So quite a few of you, very familiar with it. I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about it. The average stay is 12 to 18 months of people who stay there. We have 29 units, very tiny, without heat in most cases. A few of them we do allow heat because of health issues. There is a heated bathhouse, a heated living room, a big yurt. And we've had 2 marriages at the village. And lots of good things happening, people getting jobs, going back to school, just some wonderful things. But one of the biggest problems that we've had is helping people to transition out, simply because there's such a dearth of affordable housing in our community. And people were not finding anything they could afford even after they got income settled and they got their disability arranged or they got their job. There was just no place they could rent. So we began researching, why is that? Why is that we have such a lack of affordable housing? And I was stunned when I discovered this, that the wait times for someone seeking a single, 3 bedrooms is about a year, 2 to 4 bedrooms, 2 to 3 years, but a single bedroom or a studio apartment, right, for just that single individual couple without children, 6 years, upwards to 7 years. When I last checked at Homes for Good's website, they were processing applications that they received in September of 2011. That was about 2 months ago that I checked. I did go back and check yesterday, and they don't have quite, they changed their website, but of all the 16 units they operate, this is the second largest housing authority in the state of Oregon. They have over 1,000 units, 16 different sites. All of them are closed. All of them. You cannot get on a wait list with Homes for Good. So, you know, just ponder the significance of that. So we decided we needed to build our own affordable housing. Emerald Village, Eugene, how many have been out to see that site? Excellent, wonderful. So again, I don't need to talk a lot about it because you've already seen it. 22 tiny homes, and I'm talking tiny, right? 160 to 280 square feet, with the exception of that one two-story home that's a little over 300. And very simple designs to maximize use of volunteers, as well as to make them super affordable. The challenge we gave to the architects who designed these was to build us a home for $25,000, $15,000 in materials, $10,000 in labor, not counting the foundation. We put in the foundations, we bought the property, we did all the site development. We said to these architects and their partners, this is a challenge we give to you, and I like to kid them because I discovered they cheat. They went to all of their friends, vendors, and said, well, I'm donating this, what can you donate? And we got things like marble countertops and custom designed showers, and just, they're really high quality homes. I mean, they're just super cool. So the true cost of these homes are probably $40,000 to $45,000 in most cases, but still, you compare that to the cost of most housing, particularly affordable housing that's built in this country, that it's 4 or 5 times that. And simple designs to maximize the use of volunteers. So a lot of volunteers have been involved. 16 of the 22 homes are now finished. We did the groundbreaking with the residents themselves. So we chose our first group of residents before we broke ground so that they could be a part of the project. The mayor was there. By the way, I should note Commissioner Pat Farr is here with us. Good to see one of our elected officials here. Are there any others tonight? And the villagers themselves are required to put in 50 hours, a minimum of 50 hours of sweat equity. His name will come to me in just a second, right in the middle, one of our villagers. Help me, someone, why am I not remembering his name? At any rate,
age is why you can't remember.
Yeah, I know, right? He has put in several hundred hours. It'll come to me in a second, but at any rate, and part of the point of that is building community, not just being involved in building your home. And all of these villagers, all except one in that picture is a villager, are there working side by side with each other as they help each other build their homes. The total cost of the project is about $1.8 million, but $500,000 of that came from the in-kind contributions of the builders, the architects and their partners. And the nonprofit has raised a little over $1 million. We still got a little over $100,000 that we have to raise. But so the actual full cost, including everything, is between $75,000 to $80,000 per home, whereas affordable housing typically is $200,000 per unit. Baskin Village was $169,000 several years ago. Today, probably be 10–20% higher. And the villagers are purchasing a membership in the co-op that operates the facilities. So they own the co-op. The co-op leases the facility from the nonprofit. Their membership has a $1,500 value. They're paying $50 a month. So after 30 months, they fully paid their membership, and now that portion of it goes away. Their rent can go down. Or if we find after 30 months we're not meeting the budget, we could increase the rent without any paying to them, because it'll still be less than what they were paying previously now that they've paid off their membership fee. But the idea of that is that they own a piece of their own home and they have a real asset. So if and when they decide to move out, the nonprofit buys that membership back from them, turns around and sells it to the next resident. They have that $1,500 they can use for whatever they need. And we moved our first 2 villagers in right before Christmas, Gib and his dog Sadie, who had been living at Opportunity Village and then in an RV before he moved into his own little home. Gib is in his mid-70s, a veteran. We discovered over half the residents at Emerald Village are over the age of 60, something we did not anticipate, that it was going to be a much older community, and there are certainly big implications to that. And so one of the exciting events is to be able to participate in that move-in for those residents, and gathering all the people that work on the house and other community members with a little ceremony when we hand over the key. It's an incredibly emotional kind of experience. But more importantly, I think, is it just shows that relationship between the builder and the resident. So there's a connection there. And it's just a true honor to be able to participate in something like that. One of the women who lives at the village, who had been in Opportunity Village before she moved to Emerald Village, lives on Social Security. She thought she would be able to live comfortably on her Social Security, and unfortunately retired a little early. Some of you shaking your head and know where this is going. And within a year after retiring, she became homeless because her Social Security was not enough to pay the rent. Ended up at Opportunity Village. When she moved in, she told us she thought she was going to spend the rest of her life living in a shelter. And so now to have her own home is just an incredible experience. LeBeau is such a delight. Oh my gosh. You got to get to know LeBeau. This is his home. He chose the colors. He painted it. LeBeau told me he's put in over 400 hours on his home. He spoke at our big fundraising event. Is anyone there at King Estate? And from what I gather, I had to miss it because I was at my son's gig in Chicago, but that he pretty much had everyone in tears, telling the story of how he lived with an abusive partner because he had no choice. It was the only thing he could afford. And now to be able to live in his own place that's safe and decent, and no longer forced to live in that situation. Incredibly powerful. So we are not just building housing, we are really seeking to build community. To build places where people are there to support one another, be there for with each other. Also, they're working collaboratively to come up with fundraising ideas as well as business ideas to augment their income so that they truly can afford it. I didn't mention the rent for this. $250 to $350 a month to get your own decent home. And as I say, 50 of that's that membership fee that goes away after 30 months. So truly super affordable. There's a clubhouse that's under construction right now. So if you think about it, in a tiny home, you don't have a lot of room to do much entertaining or to have committee meetings. So the clubhouse is absolutely essential to the village concept, where there's a large open space and a full kitchen. So you can have big parties, and even can be a resource to the community and the Whitaker community where they can rent it out for their own events. The community involvement in this project has just been enormous. 13 different architects, a dozen different firms, construction firms. Chambers Construction pulled up, and I just happened to be there that day, and this gentleman gets out and asks us, what are we doing, and tells us he'd heard about it, and he came by to check to see what they could do, and he said, how come you never invited us to come and build a house for you? And so Chambers built our bike barn and the trash enclosure. But well over 1,000 individuals, when you include all the donors that have made this possible. So it really, truly takes a community to build a village. And the other cool thing about this is it cuts across political lines. So Governor Brown was our fundraiser speaker for our big event a year ago, and then Newt Buehler stopped in a couple of months ago, and next thing I know he's tweeting out about Emerald Village and how we as a state need to do more to address the issue of homelessness. So it appeals to both ends of the spectrum. You can check out all the information about it at our website, squareonevillages.org. And on there's a toolbox that gives you concrete ideas of how to do this kind of work that we are making available to other communities. We have a project that is actually opening up in Ashland in just a couple of weeks. We own a piece of property in Cottage Grove where we're seeking to build 13 tiny homes there, and already have a family living in the home that's on the property. We're in conversation with two communities in the Seattle area. I'll be in Corvallis on November 1st to announce a project there, and so on and so forth. And just dozens of other conversations we're having with communities all around the Northwest and helping them to get going. Project in Medford that was inspired by our work that's already been operating now for a couple of years. So ways that you can be involved. Well, become a village sponsor. Individuals, we suggest $35 a month because that's what the villagers themselves pay to help cover the cost of utilities. So you can help us by making that kind of pledge. Groups, churches, we suggest $125 a month because that is our cost of what it takes to provide that shelter at Opportunity Village. Or to adopt a project like this Rotary Club that came in and painted one of our units for us, and some of the units, now that it's been 5 years, are in great need of a new paint job, and there are many other projects that we can line up for folks that want to come in and adopt a project at the village. I'll say a word about the family shelter. When I came here in 1991, they just started the family shelter, Interfaith Family Shelter, and they told me we're housing families in churches, fellowship halls, and basements as a temporary solution until we come up with a permanent one. 27 years we have been housing that program here in our church and other churches. Lots of you I know have been doing it, yeah? 27 years that program's been going on, and they just opened up their facility now. And it's a beautiful facility. They're still using those same dividers in it, if anyone's been there to tour, but it's a beautiful facility. The car camping program. We've been doing it here for over 20 years, whether using trailers or Conestogas, like you see there, to adopt one individual. You can have up to 6 of these in Eugene, up to 3 in Springfield. And be glad to talk to people more about how that works. It doesn't even necessarily need to cost you. The city gives a grant to St. Vincent de Paul to provide porta potties and help manage the program. As it all happens, this Conestoga next door to our church is actually available right now. We're revamping our program, going to do something a little different. So I'm looking for a home for this Conestoga, and I have a woman in great need for it. So if you're interested in that, talk to me and be glad to hook you up. The Egan Warming Center, maybe you know Major Thomas Egan that died on the streets, good friend of Pat Farr. We hold a memorial service every year there at the site, not too far from the mission, where he froze to death. We always need volunteers for that program. It's open typically around 20 nights a year, mostly using, again, churches. We did receive word this year that the fire marshal is basically going to close down our site and Everett United Methodist because we're operating in basements without sprinklers, and that's against the fire code. You can't sleep in a basement without a sprinkler. You can't sleep on the second floor without a sprinkler. You're only allowed to sleep on ground floors when there's no sprinkler. So he hasn't told us we absolutely can't do it this year, but he's kind of put us on notice that we have to find other locations. Pat, you didn't know about this?
I heard a rumor about it.
Yeah. So I've been talking to Pete Kearns about it, and we'll see. So we're in great need of additional sites. He's waving at me time, which is very good because I'm right at the end. So I just want to conclude by saying that I believe very strongly, as does Square One, as I think most of you do, that just because someone is poor, that doesn't mean they should have poor housing. And that we should be able to create space for all the members of our community so that everyone can have a place to call home. Thank you. You can find more information on our website.
The story I want to tell tonight is about how in the context of the congregation I serve, how our story is unfolding. And it is still very much unfolding, but the story began a long time ago. I came to serve First Congregational United Church of Christ 21 years ago. And at the time, the interfaith overnight shelter that Dan mentioned was a temporary solution that we were all sort of supporting. And our congregation has been a long time participant in that, as well as a lot of other initiatives to serve the poor. But I want to talk a little bit about our context, I guess. So First Congregational is a between 23rd and 24th on Harris. So a lot of people know University Park. So we share that block just south of the University of Oregon. And it's kind of interesting, as Dan mentioned, that, you know, being in the heart of Eugene, well, our previous church was actually the old Bijou movie theater. And there were stories I'm told, because we still have church members who were around when our building was built in 1957, that there were many people who were really concerned that our congregation was moving kind of into the middle of nowhere, which is a little bit ironic when you think about where we're located. But a more residential neighborhood out of the center of town. It wasn't really a city in those days, but out of the center of town. But the thing is, I think one of the parts of the story where we're at today is part of that realization that we have become a city. And for a long time, we've struggled with a lot of big city problems, like unaffordable housing, and, you know, the increase in homelessness. But also, you know, this notion that we can afford to have lots of space in our city. Well, we've made a decision not to extend our city boundaries, and we've also made some decisions code-wise not to build up. So people are moving here, our community is growing, and has been growing for a long time, and there are no places, especially affordable places for people to live. So we live in our congregation. We have quite a lovely campus. We're right next to a beautiful park. There's a lot of green space. We really value that. We use that space. We have a lot of programs for children, including a preschool and summer camps in the summer. The Department of Human Services uses our building for a lot of programs with foster children. We have a pretty busy and bustling place. We have a lot of recovery groups. There's a lot of activity. But when we look out those windows and see this green space and realize that we're moving from, and I wouldn't say we're suburban where we are, but, you know, we're in town, but having all this green space when really infill is what we need to be tending to as a community, and what a challenge it is in communities like ours, in our neighborhood that is zoned R1. So, for a long time our congregation has been growing in our awareness and of our desire to be more responsive to the critical issue of homelessness beyond the areas of participation that we've already been involved with. About, I guess, 6 years ago, a group from the congregation, I mean, one thing about our congregation is we're largely middle class, a lot of professionals, a lot of educators, a lot of people in healthcare professions. And I say this to give a little more context because I think one of the things all of us can do, whatever our context, is kind of assess what our resources are that are distinctive to our particular place, because this is never a one-size-fits-all solution. And I often refer to a quote, Howard Thurman, I think, originally said it, but Parker Palmer uses it a lot, that our vocation is where our passion meets the world's great need. And as we know, the world's needs are tremendous. So where are our passions? Where are our gifts, both as individuals and as communities? And so our congregation, I guess it was about 7 years ago, we started something called the Housing Initiative. And our goal, a little audacious, was to, you know, resolve homelessness, of course, because that's what we all want, right? We don't want anybody, as Dan so beautifully put, you know, because you're poor doesn't mean you should be literally shut out in the cold. So we, in the beginning of the Housing Initiative, we wanted to step up our game a bit. You know, we raised a lot of money. That's another asset of our congregation. People have resources and they're generous and they want to share them. So we articulated a vision that and I won't go into it, but we knew that people had different aspects of, or different ways of addressing homelessness that they felt passionate about. So we did a big fundraiser, and there was an overwhelming response. So we were able to help community-supported shelters. We were able to build a Habitat house, and we've built others since. We were able to help with Emerald Village and a number of other projects. And we thought, always partnerships, that's a real value. That's something that we have really valued in our congregation. So we felt like that was an important contribution. But then, about correct me if I'm wrong. You know, we've been looking, we always had our housing initiative meetings in our church library, and it looks out on our campus. And there's this little piece of land that's right on 24th, part of our property. And, you know, many of us have been standing there and looking at it, and, you know, that looks like enough space. You could actually put some housing there. And around the same time that a number of us were having these conversations, and kind of our neighborhood association, so we're in the South University Neighborhood Association, and I think at the time there was a big initiative with the city encouraging neighborhood associations to think about ways of addressing homelessness throughout the city, and not just in the Whitaker neighborhood, and really kind of sharing in resolving these issues. And so they came to us and said, would there be some way that the church might be interested in like a tiny house project, and so on. And so we actually talked with people, we talked with some builders, we were assessing, and there were a few things that we knew about ourselves. We didn't want to be landlords, and we also really wanted to partner in this. We wanted a strong community partner, because we also didn't want to be social workers. We were really clear that we had some boundaries around that, and that we'd love to be a supportive community, but that we were not best suited to do that, you know, the social work kind of supporting. And the other thing is that has been a long history in our congregation is around supporting families with children, or children and their families. And so those things kind of converged into a proposal that, and I'll just talk about it briefly because I have just a minute or two left, what is evolving, and we're at the point, actually, of going to the city to get a permit, and it has taken 2 years to get there, and we're hoping that what we're proposing to do will be replicable, so others will not have to take quite so long. I mean, that's a part of our vision, that what we're hoping to create in our campus is something, because there are a lot of congregations, religious communities in our city that have property that could be used in all kinds of ways, maybe a tiny house community. What we're proposing is to partner with St. Vincent de Paul. They have a program called Connections, and it's a highly effective program of getting people who are families with children who are chronically homeless, mostly living in their cars, in the interfaith shelter program, into a transitional housing program. So this is kind of a funny, it's permanent housing that we're proposing to build, but it would be transitional for the families who would come through. And it has a lot of support through St. Vincent de Paul. It's a kind of highly structured. It takes some doing to get into the program, and it's been highly effective in moving people into stable housing and thriving as families. So St. Vincent de Paul will own the homes. This is how we're not going to be landlords. We will provide the infrastructure, and we had to actually change a city code that now has been changed in the city of Eugene, that places of worship or religious communities that have appropriate property can build 2 homes on their property for low-income housing. So that is now part of our city code. And we're in an R1 neighborhood, so that there are a lot more restrictions because it's a residential neighborhood. So that was really important because we tried so many different avenues and nothing was working. So we realized we needed to do some advocacy and change something. So, so there'll be 2 homes. They'll be owned by St. Vincent de Paul. They're not tiny homes, but they are small homes, but they're suitable for families with children. And this was partly their requirement, that they needed to be a little bit bigger than the usual tiny home. And St. Vincent de Paul, as you probably know, has been buying up trailer parks and replacing a lot of the housing. So they already have a manufacturer who's doing these manufactured homes, so they have a relationship. And so we create the infrastructure, we get the permits, we kind of create all that we're at the point to file for the permits now, which is pretty exciting. And then once everything's set and all the utilities are hooked up, they will bring in the homes, and we will partner with them in supporting these families. So the program's about 2 years. Families can extend if they're finishing a degree or some extenuating circumstance. But the hope is over that period of 2 years, and it has been very successful in this program, that they will transition into more permanent housing. So I'll stop there.
By current standards, Resurrection is mid-size. 20 years ago, we would have been a small church, but nowadays we're mid-size as the church shrinks and dies. But we're much smaller than FCC or FCC. I am the only clergy person there. I am the only full-time staff person. We have a 12-hour-a-week secretary and a couple of children's education people. Unlike Melanie and Dan, which are multi-staff churches. And financially, our budget is, again, mid-size. It's about $280,000 a year, which is, what, a quarter of yours or thereabouts? Something like that, probably half of what Dan's is here. Our physical plan also is small. Our Eugene site is a basement, but it's a basement it's a walkout basement, it's a garden basement, so I think that the fire marshal, they never go to South Eugene anyway. So we have no storage space, we have a very small kitchen, we have an insufficient place to gather anyone besides our sanctuary, so this might sound familiar to your religious communities, we have minimal amounts of space. But we do have a 2.2 acre plot of land that we're on. And I like to brag that we have the most beautiful parking lot in Eugene. The one at the top of Hendricks Park, that's nice. That's nice, but ours, I think, is more beautiful. We have oak groves and camas stands. We have the best labyrinth in Oregon, in the woods there. It is spectacular. We do it. It's wonderful, and it's always open. But what makes ours special, super special, is how we use it. That's just setting the context. These three churches have very different resources at our disposal, with different congregations, different financial resources, different theological bents, different class orientations, and we are working on housing issues in the way that each of us are able to do so. And that's the key that I see it, is how your community can help, the vocation, that idea, what is it you have to give? What is your clergy and staff willing not only to tolerate, but to really get behind, to really participate in, because housing folks, it is a 24/7 ministry.
Oh yeah, parking lot, yes.
It's beautiful. And we just replaced that awful white thing with a beautiful wooden pavilion now. It's actually quite attractive. It's lovely. And we have another house too. We have a fourth house just came in. But it is a high impact ministry, particularly for clergy and staff. Besides a couple of deaths, the only thing I've ever gotten a call on vacation is problems in the parking lot. It's a ministry in which you are taking responsibility for housing someone. That is a huge responsibility. I mean, yes, we're giving these people housing, but they are putting themselves at our mercy. And you can't just stop doing it, right? It's a responsibility, it's a commitment. So that's really, really important. For a little church in South Eugene, we're busy. We do a lot in the world of homelessness. We're the dinner hosts at the new night shelter next week. God have mercy on us. It's going to be great, but the church this week didn't show up. A lot of reasons for that, and for us, since it's like quadrupled the number of people we serve for Shelter Week, because we're a small church. We had like 25 people. Now we're feeding 80 next week, so we'll figure it out, I'm sure, hopefully. Yeah. We're an Egan Post site. We provide home starter kits, which are these kits that we work with 7 or 8 different agencies in town to give housing goods, pots, pans, stuff that food stamps don't pay for. And we've been a long-term host of St. Benny's car camping program. Formally and informally, we've had people living on the property. We've got beautiful woods. It's had people living in it forever. And we had the first Conestoga huts in the city in our parking lot. So one of our residents has been with us since 2013. And he's a beloved member of not only the ministry, but of the congregation. I baptized him at Easter Vigil this past year. It was one of the high points of my ministry. Huts are very important sites of emergency shelter. They are not housing. Dan, and transition takes a long time. Dan tells a story that he had 2 guys that moved in, and they had just applied for their Section 8s, and 7 and 8 years later they moved out when their housing came available. Okay? This takes a long, long time. So we had 3 huts, each with long-term residents. And theologically, we really wrestled with how do we do all that we can? How do we apply all the resources we have? And I made a mistake, and I started reading some Dorothy Day. She'll always send you down the right/wrong path. and Peter Morin, the founders of the Catholic Worker Movement. And one of Morin's easy essays, he addresses the issue of housing, and he wrote that every house should have a Christ room, a room where you could, if someone in need, you let them stay there. Okay. And he figured that parishes, we have rectories, we house seminarians, that a parish should have a house of hospitality where members of the parish, and these from a Catholic context, their parish could have 5,000 families, a village. The parish should have a place that can house people. And then there's the Catholic worker houses, that's the next stage. That's what Brother Charlie is doing with workers living in community with those they're serving. And then the crown jewel of Morin's plan were the agronomic universities, which were agrarian communities where they go out and save the world, create the Commonwealth of God, one sheep a week at a time. We talked about it at length about how we needed to offer something closer to housing. And from those conversations, Hospitality Village was born. That's this up here. There are tiny houses of hospitality. And not everyone liked the idea. Morin and Day make people very, very uncomfortable. But we pushed it through, and it's happening. We wanted to offer as close an approximation to housing as we could, given our resources. That was partly for the mercy of a better place to live, and also it was more aesthetically pleasing to match our beautiful parking lot. So with the help of some wonderful donors in the community, we got $30,000 came in unasked for from outside the church, which is pretty awesome, and a $60,000 grant from the Diocese of Oregon, we began this project. So we did not have the resources to build housing, okay? And our neighbors in Southeast Eugene are properly and appropriately and amazingly and thankfully wonderful and welcoming of our homeless residents. It's amazing. Everything you assume about what an upper middle class neighborhood would be, that's not how anyone's behaved. It's great. We would have had pitchforks and torches if we were going to cut down any trees. Okay? So we have parking lots. So yeah. And we're a small parish. When I will leave the parish, which will be at some point, do we have a deep enough bench to keep up with housing? I don't know. We have a part-time secretary. I deal with most of the parking lot stuff myself. I couldn't leave the parish or my successor with that what could be a lodestone around their necks. So we did what we did. So we worked with Alex Daniels, who built the bungalows at OBE, and he built 4 of the houses at Eve, or 6?
3.5.
3.5 houses down there. And he's a member of Resurrection. He comes to church there. So we hired him to build the houses. They're small. They're teeny tiny houses. We have small houses, tiny houses, and we have the teeny tiny houses. They're wired to electricity and they're heated. They're partially fenced around a pavilion. They're nice to look at, and they're mounted on trailers. And there's no plumbing. We're still part of the car camping program, so the porta potty is there. So I'm from north of Boston, and in all of New England, there are lots of rules, lots of laws about everything. None of this would fly there if ever would this happen. So God bless Eugene again. This place is awesome. Being on wheels, they are not buildings. They are unregulated. They're considered vehicles by the DMV. They have license plates on the back. Okay? You can see there's a license plate in the bottom corner of that one you can see there. Our electrician went to the electrical inspector and was told that it's not inspectable because it's vehicular. Vehicular wiring is not regulated. Glenn at Beacon Electric is awesome. It has a very, very light footprint. It is substantial in what is offered. The buildings are sweet. It's a community within a community. We're helping people. And while all of this everything is perishing, right? This can be picked up and moved if needed. Okay, we're not, even the electricity is RV, you can unplug it and go, okay? We have locks on the hitches so they don't go, which is good. So you have to do what your capacity allows you to do, not just what you should be able to do, because you should be able to have an opportunity village in your backyard there at church. We should be able to do that too, but we can't, right? That's just not possible. The backlash would be too severe. So in the end, they cost $15,000 each, just over $15,000 each. We've had youth groups from other churches come and spend nights and paint for us. We furnished them with a bed, a small fridge, a microwave, coffee maker, and lamps. It is still under the auspices of the car camping program, so if there's a problem that I'm away for or I just don't want to deal with, we can always call Keith and he will come and take care of it instantly, which, again, Keith Heath runs the car camping. He's awesome. He's a superhero in town. And we don't use many resources there, but it's insulation for the parish, and they give us the bucks, the porta potty. But the biggest resource we have, besides our parking lot, is us, the resurrection people. And we are very conscious and conscientious about welcoming people to be part of our community. There's no requirement, there's no pressure, but we don't hesitate. We're not timid about inviting. We tried really hard to build an advocate program where a member of the church was assigned to each resident and would work with them, be a companion in Christ, an encourager in chief, that kind of thing. But as some of the residents are part of our church community, they're pledging members of the church community, the boundary issues became very murky, very hard to navigate without more training and very tight pastoral supervision. So that we pulled back from that program for the moment, and we're doing two things. One, we're getting involved with the Stephen Ministries. You know what Stephen Ministry is? It's a pastoral care ministry. So we're starting one. It's awesome. It's a listening companionship, kind of soul friend, Kenneth Leach kind of thing. It's awesome. So each of the residents will have a Stephen minister assigned to them when that program is done after 5 months of training in February. And we are in the process of hiring a case manager for 10 hours a month that will be there, and the residents will have to meet with them once a month, sort of come up with some goals, and then have someone to sort of keep the fire under them to keep moving towards the goals that they have with. I helped with the MSW internship at OVE, which has been a huge success of having an MSW student there helping with folks, so we're trying to do that. We're using money from the diocesan grant to hire that. If you're looking for a 10-hour-a-month, very flexible job, we are hiring. MSW is optional, case management experience is not. But if you want to talk about that, we are hiring someone, so please come talk to me. $25 an hour, 10 hours a month, completely open schedule. So we just got our fourth house. We were approached by First Place Family Center to house a family. So we do have a mom and child in one of them. That was the idea that you can't bring those two groups together. That was not First Place policy. That was just practice. So good to know. So we do have we do background checks on everyone now for to make sure no one's registered for anything. But it's gone fabulously well. We have a 4-year-old child out there, so it changes the temperature of the whole place, which is lovely. We don't require sobriety, but if that's one of your struggles, we can help make it a requirement for you if that is helpful, but we're pretty liberal about that. Besides the Mass, this is the best thing that we do. It's a highly visible witness of mercy. It's an example to a wealthy neighborhood about sharing. I mean, in Southeast Eugene hosts Nightingale. I mean, Southeast Eugene is doing their part. It's good, very good. And it's inviting folks into our community, into our lives, giving people who only interact with the homeless through their car windows most of the time an opportunity to really share life with someone they wouldn't otherwise. That's the church being the body of Christ in the fullest way that I know how to do it. But really, besides the celebration of the Mass, Hospitality Village is the most Christian thing that we do, and the rewards are life, and it's life abundant. Thank you.
So the first question, and I'll give this to Melanie since she's reaching for it already. What actions would transform the level of empathy for individuals and families living without adequate shelter? What actions would transform the level of empathy? So each group will have somebody to be the recorder who will report back to the larger group when we reconvene as a large group. The second question I'll give to Dan. What are the one or two things that churches could do working together to make a significant change in this community?
We'll go back by where the cookies are.
Okay, third question is, how does walking the talk of our religious faith change the moral climate of the entire community?
And it's not a faith community per se, but the people's dedication to saving the planet and helping her is very deep.
Church have kind of a general idea of what homelessness looks like, but we volunteer and participate, and we are connected with other people. But I think a lot of people directly in our church don't know.
But we have several thousand high school students who are homeless. One little girl who just got a 4-year scholarship to the U of O, she was homeless for 4 years.
What are one or two things that faith communities could do to make a significant difference?
So what can we do to get that sense of emergency that's no different than a flood or an earthquake, that this is an emergency? More advertising. The example of a wonderful article on community-supported shelters that some people saw, and the great work that they are doing in Santa Clara, wasn't it, with Messiah Lutheran, in opening up a couple of Conestogas there, but more things like that, getting it into the news. Using land to develop what developers like St. Penny's and Shelter Care are doing. Creating some kind of clearinghouse where there's a hub for information, where you can go to get critical information. Where are the gaps? What things need to be filled?
Our question is, how does walking the talk of our religious faith change the moral climate of the entire community?
Wow.
Really good question. The not in my backyard concept came up and someone had a brilliant answer. Every church should actually do something in its own backyard, doing something that allows for people in the community to come and join. Another concept was somebody has to start. When the bonds of the community begin to break down, some force that's already united, already organized, has to come and help rebuild that community. Churches can be providers of the ways and means for other people to participate.
Just some words of gratitude. Having such an expanded sense of the heart energy and the openness and the willingness and the interest in this room, and recognizing that as we share this one-to-one, and then it ripples out beyond this 50 people, that we touch more and more and more of our community, and that energy then moves into good and greater good and still greater good as we allow ourselves to be the vessels, the lights, the messengers that allow this message to be expanded and promoted as we are used in this good and perfect way.